How about that? There we go. Okay. Before I call the meeting to order, I'd like to ask everyone to be aware that the city has a limit of 10 persons in the audience in this room. We do have audio that is working out in the lobby, and you can, any other people that might want to come in can certainly be out there. And we've got sign-up sheets both in the lobby and on the table in the back of this room if you wish to speak at the public hearing this afternoon. There's also a digital sign-up sheet that's available, and we will work through those as best we can. With that, I'll call the February 1 meeting of the Meridian Transportation Commission to order and start with the roll call. I'm Walter Steed, Chairman, and David Ballard.
Present.
Ron Lancaster.
Present.
Tom LeClaire.
Present.
Tracy Hopkins.
Present.
Stephen Lewis.
Here.
Jared Smith. And if any of you are on the telephone, we can't see your names, so you'll need to let us know that you are on phone if you're not on Zoom or in the meeting in person. Zachary Shoemaker, and more about him in a moment. Joseph Leckie.
Present.
Ex officios are Luke Cavender, Sean Martin, Tony Teasdale, Ion Updike.
Here.
Lisa Taysom.
Here.
And Justin Price. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
Justin Price is on Zoom, and I have him added now. Miss Jared Smith just joined us on Zoom as well.
Okay.
This is Justin Price. I'm here.
And Sean Martin is as well on Zoom.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, the first item of business is to adopt today's agenda. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt the agenda.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is adopted. Zach Shoemaker, to my left, is the newest member of the Transportation Commission. He was appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council, I believe, last week. And Zach, as per our custom, I would invite you to do a brief introduction of yourself and why you wish to join us, and we're certainly glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you. You hear me? My name's Zach Shoemaker. I moved over to this side of the state about a dozen years ago, living in Meridian since then. Came over here for schooling at Boise State, went there for a few years, worked for the state of Idaho for a few years, and work for a home builder now, but I was interested in getting back into what my degree is in public administration and just interested in serving in the city, working with the transportation department and just, helping good policy to the city council, the mayor's office to help out where I can. So I just love Idaho. I love skiing, snowmobiling, all the fun stuff that everyone moves to Idaho to do. So glad to be here.
Well, you're very welcomed among this group. We're looking forward to working with you.
Yes, welcome.
The next item of business is the approval of the minutes of the January 4 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the minutes as presented.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Minutes are approved. Under old business, we have a couple of items. The first is the transportation projects update, and Mrs. Carson will jump through that for us.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, as per usual, the items that are new to the transportation projects update are bolded there in your packet. For the sake of time today, I'm just going to stand for questions if anybody has those.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I just have one question. There is a temporary traffic signal that is proposed at the intersection of Ustick and Black Cat. I didn't see that in the ACHD project list. I wanted to ask Miranda if that could be added in the future.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Lewis, I will add that.
Thank you.
I had heard about those as well, but didn't see it in the thing, so I was also curious. Anyone else with questions regarding the transportation projects update or comments? Okay, with that, we'll move to the next item of old business, and that is for me to tell the commission that on February 9, and I believe, Ms. Carson, that is still the date?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
February 9, I will report to a city council workshop on what this group has been doing over the past 12 months, recognizing that I've only been here for 6, but I've talked to a couple of you about what you might like to see included in that. And I would invite the others of you who I haven't ask that. If you have something you feel should be mentioned in that report, please send me an email or call me or let me know, and I'll be happy to add it. The main things that I've got, and I'm not going, and there's in your packet, there's the 2-page report that'll be given to the council in its entirety, and I'm not going to read it to them. I'm just going to go over some highlights, which will be the addition of myself and Jared Smith to the commission last year. The fact that we look at issues that the public brings to us, that the city staff brings to us, that other entities such as ITD, ACHD might put up on our radar, and meet once a month for 2 hours to discuss those items and decide if there's anything we wish to either recommend or changes to or support to the city council to whom we report. We also go over the ACHA 5-year work plan in detail, more about that later. We interact, like I say, with ITD a good bit as well. A very important thing that was done in 2020 was the Transportation Commission discussed its future role and how to expand that role to be helpful and relevant to the city council and the community. So some of that has been done through the formation of 2 new standing committees that were formed during the year to add them to the school zone committee that already existed. Those are the Project Review and Ordinance Committee and a Development Committee. They also contain purpose statements when those were formed, and they have all met. And the reason for the public hearing we're going to hold here in a few minutes is came out of one of those two committees and their work in 2020. I think that pretty well concludes the high points of what we'll be talking about at the City Council workshop. Again, if any of you wish to have other things mentioned prominently, I'll be happy to do so. Okay, with that, we'll move to the new business, the first item of which is the ATV UTV ordinance public hearing and discussion. We're going to start this with having Tom LeClaire, the chair of the subcommittee that studied this, introduce it. And then I'll ask Sergeant Frazier with the police department to speak to the origin of the question. And then ask Ms. Emily Kane, our city attorney office representative, to explain the proposed ordinance change that's before this commission. So with that, Mr. LeClaire, I would give you the floor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the commission and members of the public and staff. We appreciate your attention to this issue. We've looked at this possibility of doing an ordinance here for a few months. It was kind of brought to us by the Meridian Police Department. There's concern that there's more and more of these vehicles on the road these days, and we want to be sure that it's understood that on the bigger collector streets especially, and arterial streets, that we have a safe environment for those vehicles, and that they be limited in their access to those areas, and that there's not a big interest by the police department, I don't think, to do a heavy enforcement on this. I think there's just mostly, it gives us ground to stand on in providing a warning capability for unsafe activity, and to have a small light penalty if something unsafe does happen. So it's or if we see repeated behavior that doesn't seem correct or safe. And so that's kind of where we started. And as we worked on this, we found there were the state law was pretty wide open and didn't really cover city streets and city arterials, which were our concern areas. And so we thought this was even more reason, as we wrestled kind of with jurisdiction for a meeting or two in November and December. We came to realize this is another reason to put this in, is so that we have ground to stand on legally with this. So those were the two developments we found. And then kind of the last shot that we took at this draft ordinance, we thought, well, what could be wrong with it? What have other cities done? And do we still like it? And so the city of Boise, for example, exempts agricultural activity and snow removal. Well, we looked at that and we talked about it, and we thought, well, most agricultural activity is exempted by the state anyway, so we didn't think we'd be enforcing someone who was using these vehicles for agriculture activity anyway. And the snow removal was occasional and tended to be focused on sidewalks and parking lots where we're not this ordinance isn't that concerned about that. There is language in there about loading and unloading and testing equipment and things, and we've got that in there. So we think this is a good ordinance, but we're open to this. We wanted to do this public hearing to hear if there's ways that this could be better, if somehow we've got something that's not as fair as it should be, we certainly want to look at that. But so that's the purpose of the meeting today, is to get feedback, and so it looks like we're going to get a lot of it. So that's good, and look forward to the comments and the involvement of the public with this today. And I think that's all I have. I'd stand for any questions by commissioners about this.
Any questions for Mr. Leclerc from the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster?
a question about procedure, I guess. As I look at the agenda, it says the commission take action which may include continuing the matter to a future meeting, remanding the matter to the ordinance subcommittee, making a recommendation to city council, or no further action. So is that the list of things that we can do today, or what is our role in this today, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lancaster, my belief and understanding is that our role today, when we open the public hearing, is to give any citizens that wish to speak to this proposed ordinance change time to do so. We want everyone that wishes to speak to us. We want to hear from them. I'll set some ground rules right before that starts, but that's the intent. And then it's up to the commission what they wish to do. We have brought before us a proposed change in the current city golf cart ordinance, and it's up to the commission if they wish to act on it in any fashion, to approve it and move it forward to the council with a recommendation that they approve it, to decide that the commission does not wish to do anything further with it and drop it, or to make suggestions to staff about what we might want them to either investigate, tell us about, or modify it in some fashion that better suits the commission's wishes. Ms. Carson, does that pretty well?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think you stated it well. And to answer the question also, that those are the 4 actions that are
Okay.
listed, so.
Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, with that, I would invite Sergeant Frazier, the Meridian Police Department Traffic Division Supervisor, to speak to the origin of the question and why it was brought to us, maybe 6 months ago. Sergeant?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the chairman said, I brought this before the Transportation Commission several months ago now. Over the last year, 12 to 18 months or so, our department's seen a lot of these types of vehicles on the roads, UTVs, golf carts, and so forth. And we've also had a lot of engagement with the community about those things. And we noticed 3 key things that are continually recurring when it comes to this topic. One of those is the safety of those vehicles on the roadway in all the various formats that we see them. They're not necessarily designed or equipped to be driven upon a roadway, any roadway, the same that a car would be, which some people desire to be the case. We also have observed a wide range of citizen input and opinion. There's people that want to drive a UTV or a golf cart the same as they would a car, with little or no difference whatsoever. And then there's the other end of the spectrum. We receive calls from citizens who call when there is a UTV or a golf cart on the roadway to inform us that it's there and they don't want it there. The third and most overarching issue that came into my mind with this discussion was the ambiguity of the law. The state codes pertaining to these things are not as clear as some people would think. And when you start to dive into them, they get even muddier. And I think that a law should be easy for a citizen or a lawmaker or a judge or even a police officer to read and know what the law means and what it doesn't mean. And historically, in my law enforcement career, I've followed the restricted plate and ATV and UTV laws my entire career, and they've always been a little bit difficult to decipher. I don't think a law should be that difficult to decipher. So we asked the Transportation Commission to take a look at the issue for us to see, number one, if our current city ordinance regarding golf carts needed changed, and if we should take a look at ATV and UTV usage as well.
Thank you, Sergeant. Commissioners, any questions for the sergeant? Okay, hearing none, I would ask Mrs. Emily Kane, a deputy city attorney who so graciously serves the commission and helped us with working through this in terms of what the state law says, what the city code says, where the two work together, where they don't, and listen to our deliberations on this, and has put together and put before us in the packet a proposed new ordinance. I did ask her when she first got it done to send me the strike and score on it, where she just changed the one we had. And she explained that she had attempted to do that in the first place, but as city attorneys are like to do when they get into these, they start realizing, well, if I'd written this when it was written 20 years ago, I wouldn't have said it that way, and I want to fix it now. And that's perfectly fine. So we have a proposed new ordinance that includes both ATVs and golf carts. And Ms. Kane, I will let you explain what it does.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the commission, I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation. I will attempt to share that with you now. All right, please let me know if it's not working or my slides don't advance. So I thought I'd start with just an overview of what we're dealing with so that we're all on the same page. I won't read these to you, but the state code does distinguish between ATVs, UTVs, not so much golf carts, but they're all under the same umbrella as off-highway vehicles. Golf carts are considered a specialty off-highway vehicle, but they're further defined by our city code. So these are the kind of three off-highway vehicles that we're dealing with today.
Ms. Kane, your slides are not advancing and the main slide is not full screen.
All right, darn it.
Okay, you've advanced.
I'm gonna do it this way rather than attempt to do a full screen.
Okay, fine.
Thank you. So thanks for letting me know. So these are, again, the three that we're kind of dealing with here. There are other kinds of off-highway vehicles as that term is defined in Idaho code, but this is really, these are the three types of vehicles that we see in our city. So this is what we're dealing with today. So as Sergeant Frazier mentioned, the laws in this area are pretty complicated. They involve a separate registration system for OHVs, separate license plates. But overall, I'll go over kind of the existing regulations for off-highway vehicles on city streets. So first, the driver must be licensed. The driver must be insured. Oh, let me also preface by saying that this area, because it is so complicated, I know there are some differing interpretations out there and understandings. So I tried to use a lot of citations so that if someone wants to sort of double check my work or see where that conclusion is coming from, you can do that. So again, the driver of an OHV, so a UTV or an ATV, must be licensed, insured. There are specific license plates that OHVs must have. They're called restricted vehicle license plates. So those sorts of vehicles can either have license plates that allow them to go off-road, and so on non-car roads, so Forest Service roads and mountain roads and places like that, or they can get the restricted vehicle license plates that allows that vehicle to travel in both places where it's allowed. So on city streets, they have to have the proper license plate, the proper registration. Drivers and riders under 18 must wear helmets. That doesn't apply to golf carts. The statute is specific to UTVs and ATVs. Rules of the road and criminal codes apply to the operation of these vehicles on city streets. The OHV must meet all the federal motor vehicle safety standards. So this is the equipment requirements. This area of the law is particularly complex. It talks about defroster, headlight, rear light, seat belts. There's kind of a laundry list, and it's scattered throughout the state and federal regulations. There are existing exemptions for agricultural uses of OHVs. They are exempt from registration and they can use the public highways, so city streets, to go between farms or ranches. In looking at this statute farther after the last subcommittee meeting, I noticed that there's also actually a provision for using OHVs for snow removal. So it really addresses it more in the context of registration. So if an OHV is used exclusively for snow removal, so not just sometimes it's used to remove snow and sometimes it's not, but while one is using it for snow removal, that OHV is exempt from registration requirements. And at that point, it's considered snow removal equipment, less than a vehicle. So farther to Sergeant Fraser's point that we're really not looking at regulating that aspect of OHV use. It's also generally exempt from that regulation in state code. As to golf carts, we do have an existing golf cart ordinance. So as Chairman Steed mentioned, this is not a completely new regulatory scheme, particularly not for golf carts. Those provisions do also say that golf carts are prohibited on city streets. There are exemptions for operating them on streets in the Lakeview Golf Course area. It says Cherry Lane, but the new name is Lakeview, and also in Meadow Lake Village. The city code section says that, or chapter says that golf carts cannot exceed 15 miles per hour. And as with the state code provisions, the driver must be licensed, insured, and follow all the rules of the road. So the scope of the city's authority to regulate these types of vehicles is also outlined in state code. The state code provision says that OHVs, so ATVs and UTVs, are allowed on streets in Meridian that are not controlled access highways unless otherwise prohibited by ordinance. State highways in Meridian with less than a 45 mile per hour speed limit, unless ITD or the city prohibits that. OHVs are prohibited on streets that are controlled access highways. So whatever the city says, OHVs cannot be on controlled access highways by state law, nor can they be on state highways with a speed limit higher than 45 miles per hour, unless ITD says otherwise. And even given that, those vehicles can cross the state highway. So it's a bit of a patchwork. The definition of controlled access highway is critical, and that is also a complicated kind of legal analysis, and there are differing opinions on that, but this is the overview. So this term is defined in Idaho Code Section 49109. Of course, we know what a highway is. It's everything between property lines, generally the roadway, curb, gutter, and sidewalk. Controlled access is a highway that the owner of the abutting property has no legal right of access to or from, except as determined by the highway authority. So in some places, a property could be next to a state highway and ITD would be the highway jurisdiction. But for roads in Meridian, of course, most of them, ACHD is the public authority having jurisdiction over our highways, over our roads. ACHD therefore designates which roads are controlled access highways, and they've done that generally in their master street map. Here's a close-up of that, the master street map for Meridian. So the arterials and collectors are all of the colored in streets that are shown on this map. The white spaces where there are roads are not considered controlled access highways by ACHD. Those are the local or neighborhood roads. So going back to this previous slide, without using the term controlled access highway, instead using the actual street classifications, OHVs are allowed on local streets in Meridian unless prohibited by city ordinance. And again, state highways doesn't really change. They're prohibited on arterials and collectors in Meridian, regardless of city ordinance. So state law already prohibits the operation of OHVs on arterials and collectors. So on all these roads. So the city's ability to regulate is really local streets in Meridian. The city is allowed by state code to prohibit or regulate the operation of those vehicles on local streets. So that brings me to the draft ordinance that you have in your packet. It does prohibit UTV and ATV operation on local streets unless loading or unloading or driving to test repairs or maintenance. It does not regulate the use of ATVs and UTVs on privately owned land. It's only on public roadways. The ordinance only applies to public roadways. The ordinance reiterates the state code provision that says that UTVs and ATVs must follow all the laws for motor vehicles. It changes the existing golf cart provisions in two ways. One, it just changes the name of the golf course. It used to be Cherry Lane, now it's Lakeview. And it adds Spurwing, which is a golf course that has been added to the city since the last iteration of the code. I've learned through the comments that the wording of that addition needs some work. And so I can do that if we do move forward. I would make it clear that it's the golf course community. This ordinance does not apply to motorized wheelchairs or electric mobility scooters. The rules for pedestrians apply to those. They're not vehicles, they're considered pedestrians. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do the commissioners have any questions for Mrs. Kane?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I do have one question just based on some of the comments that I read as well. I know we had discussed and you just talked about how this doesn't regulate use on private property, et cetera. Some of the comments seem to, they expressed a concern for section 7-5-3, subsection F. Could you just explain a little bit of that about the discussion of use of ATV, UTV, or golf cart on public or private property unless it's equipped with the following?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Smith, thank you. I agree. I think that that provision could use a little work. As I mentioned, there's no intention and really no jurisdiction for the city to regulate ATV and UTV usage on private property. I believe that that's a holdover, one of the hazards of kind of recycling the golf cart ordinance for this purpose. While they do they're in the same family under the state code, really golf carts are obviously for use on golf courses. And that is either private property or at the time this was originally written, that was property owned by the city. The golf course is owned by the city, rather Lakeview Golf Course. So that provision, if we do move forward, needs a little work, because I agree it's too broad. It brings in ATVs and UTVs, regulates their use on private property, which is not the intention. If people want to use ATVs and UTVs that don't have brakes and mufflers and don't meet federal motor vehicle safety standards on private property, that's really not the city's interest or business.
Yeah, so my understanding, and just to make sure I'm on the right page, because this is what I understood in the subcommittee meeting, this is essentially for privately owned common areas, right? Is that you say like a golf course, for instance, on the road, the pathways along the golf course, that's kind of the idea, correct?
Ms. Gaines?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner. So yes and no. I mean, private property is still private property.
Mhm.
So whatever people are driving on private property is really the business of themselves and the property owner. So there's certainly having a brake and using a muffler is prudent. There could still be a noise violation without the muffler if that's an issue, but the equipment of a vehicle operated on private property, exclusively on private property, is not within the city's purview.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Commissioner, may I ask a question?
Mr. Ballard?
Ms. Kane, David Ballard. I may understand this. Public property. Is there has to be any discussion about parks, school grounds, government-owned, or well, maybe I answer that question. But, you know, the property that the fire department is on. I think we understand that that's public property, but yet I think the fire department controls who gets onto the property. I'm just wondering, because I've had a couple conversations in times past where governmental entities will say, I can control this as private property. I'm wondering if that needs any clarification as to what public property means.
Ms. Gaines?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Ballard, I agree that this provision really needs to, it needs to get away from the concept of public and private property and get back to the header of that section. It talks about a public street, sidewalk, pathway, or alley. So it's truly, it's typographical error essentially, because it really applies to the operation of ATVs, UTVs, golf carts on streets, sidewalks, pathways, or alleys. When that happens, they do need to have brakes and mufflers at least. As I mentioned, under state code, they do need to have more than that. But as far as the question about government property, it's not private property, but there are restrictions regarding its use. So driving ATVs and UTVs and golf carts over park turf is not allowed. For example, there are other rules that regulate the uses of those properties. And I agree that a fire station, for example, or the police station, that's public property, but it has specific uses, and those entities do control those uses. So this provision really is less about property and private and public property than it is about roads.
Oh, and just to follow up, so hypothetically, when I was a lad and decided to take out a vehicle out on the school ground to spin Brodies in the snow, this ordinance may not address that, but another ordinance or law may address me being out there on the school grounds, puttering around, if you will. That's what brought it to mind.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, that's correct. That is between you and the school.
I use that as an example. I didn't spin Brodies on the school grounds. Okay, thank you, Ms. King.
We all had a vision in our mind over that. Any other commissioner questions or comments for Mrs. King?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster?
so I hope this is the appropriate place to ask this. So I have two questions. The first one is with regard to the definition of golf cart. And I see that it's, for all intents and purposes, the same as the existing ordinance. And I'm not a lawyer, but I, make my living writing policy. And so I when I read this, I wonder if that definition needs to be tightened also, in that I can read it and think that any car or truck could be considered a golf cart by this definition, and therefore is prohibited from driving on the road, as it says, every self-propelled vehicle which may carry golf equipment, basically. So, am I missing that, or should that be tightened up while we're at it?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Lancaster, I agree. I believe that definition was written with an assumption that we all know what a golf cart is. So as a definition, I agree it needs some work. I endeavored not to, I did not change everything about the golf cart ordinance that I maybe would have if I were writing it for the first time, but I focus generally on the UTVs and the ATVs and not in upgrading our golf cart ordinance, but that's one that I agree could really benefit.
Okay. And then my second question, Mr. Chairman, I apologize if we've talked about these things or I've asked about them before. I don't think I have, but Ms. Kane mentioned the 3 vehicles that are included here. So ATVs, UTVs, golf carts. I know that some of those state statutes that you referenced, Ms. Kane, also they also allude to we'll call them dirt bikes. That's kind of slang, I realize. Motorcycles that are off-road motorcycles. Does that need to be included here? Is that covered by other statutes already? Is that not a problem in Meridian? Perhaps this gets back with Sergeant Fraser also, but I guess, was there any thought about including that and making it 4 vehicles instead of 3?
Ms. King?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lancaster, I agree. It is that those provisions for off-highway vehicles do encompass a motorbike and in some cases motorcycles. We were specific in this ordinance to just address UTVs and ATVs, and I guess, of course, golf carts, but there was no attempt made in the ordinance to address the other, those other off-highway vehicles. But I would defer to Sergeant Fraser as to why there was no interest in that.
Sergeant Fraser?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The problem is not, I should say that the instances are not as commonly seen with what we would call a dirt bike or a non-street legal motorcycle, but also specific to a motorcycle, there is a much easier legal remedy if you're going to make a dirt bike type motorcycle street legal, if we're just using plain language in terms of registration. And that does not exist currently in state infrastructure for ATVs and UTVs. So it's a lot of the same things, but a couple key differences that differentiate that class of vehicle from this situation, I think.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Lancaster, does that answer your questions?
Very well. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other commissioner comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lewis?
just one question on the second page of the ordinance. In the section G, golf, where it talks about no person shall operate an ATV or UTV on an arterial or collector. Do we need to add a reference either to as defined by ACHD or some other language like that? Because the city doesn't define which streets are collectors or arterials.
Ms. Kane, I will presume that's for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Lewis, that is a great idea. I agree. I think that makes sense. That would clarify much of the challenge with interpreting the state code provision for that very reason. So I think that makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other commissioner comments, questions?
Commissioner Ballard, a question for Ms. Kane. I'm not trying to Sunday or Monday morning quarterback Ms. Kane. So 752 says no person shall operate on any public street, sidewalk, pathway, or alley within City of Meridian. So you have that standard. And so G, okay. No person shall operate ATV, UTV on an arterial or a collector. You've defined a road two different ways now. Does that leave for an ambiguity? And you were saying you were going back to the drafting board, and that's my comment, to give that some thought.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
And Commissioner Ballard, I agree that is redundant, both with the first sentence of that section as well as the state code. It reiterates it at a point that makes it clear that when one is loading, unloading, testing on, well, it says local streets. When one is driving an ATV under this or UTV under this exception, it reiterates that you still cannot do that on an arterial or collector. But I agree that it is redundant and perhaps unnecessary.
Well, I understand that, because I think what that gets to is you take the ATV to the repair shop, and you have to, on a very limited purpose, to unload to get to the repair facility. So you're going to be on some segment of a public, whether that's a street or an alley or whatever. I've crossed that on a couple of times with lawnmowers. So, but I appreciate your comment, and I think that helps, just to reiterate that even when you're unloading, you still can't be out on the arterial or collector as defined by ACHD. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll still see if there's a more artful way to word that.
Other commissioners, comments, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Shoemaker.
Maybe a silly question, but is agricultural landscaping the same? I think of, in my community in particular, the landscaping company drives around the gator, the streets picking up leaves and debris, and drive up and down the roads. It's pretty frequent. So not sure what our definitions are for ag and landscaping.
Mrs. Kane, would you like to take that one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, my computer is slow. The definition of agricultural is elusive in the motor vehicle code. Let me double check that. Let's see. It is not, well, oh yes, the section, Idaho Code Section 49102 7, no, yeah, A7, it defines agricultural products. And it talks about horticulture, floriculture, viticulture, fruits, vegetables, field grains, livestock, animal products, animal byproducts, bees, bee byproducts. It does not really contemplate landscaping, though arguably plant waste, plant compost, plants. It's really an argument to be made to well, whoever's making the decision, whether you're doing agricultural work. It's truly, unfortunately, a question for one's own attorney. So I'm not sure I want to weigh in on where landscaping fits in on that, but it is a good question. It does contemplate sort of the classic idea of agriculture in that the statute talks about moving the vehicle from farm to farm or ranch to ranch. So it leans toward no. However, I think you have a good argument the other way. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of guidance in the statute regarding the intent and kind of breadth of that term.
Sergeant, do you have any thoughts from a street perspective?
I would agree with Ms. Kane, and from a law enforcement perspective, that type of work with landscaping companies, picking up yard waste and things like that, and even snow removal has been going on for years anyway. It's not really a focal point for us at all, and I don't see that changing.
Okay, other questions, comments? From the commissioners? Okay, with that, we're headed, actually really are headed to the public hearing. As I said before, there's a sign-up sheet in the lobby. There's a sign-up sheet on the back table. There's a digital sign-up sheet. Ms. Carson is going to be the one to keep track of that and to call on people in a fair manner, and we'll try to walk through this. I am going to institute a 3-minute time limit, please, on your comments. I would also ask that you not reiterate some point that's been made by a previous speaker. It's perfectly okay to come and say, I totally agree with Bill or whatever, but to just repeat to us over and over the same point, not necessarily in the best interest of the argument to do that. So and also in interest of time. Speaking of time, Ms. Carson, you have any idea about how many people we're talking about speaking?
It looks like on this sign-up sheet and online, we have 11 that want to speak so far. I'm not sure if there's any on the other sign-up sheet that's in the lobby, but it doesn't look like many more have joined us. So if there is, I would.
Okay.
It's about 15.
Okay, good. Well, with 11, I'm certainly not going to set a time limit on how much time we'll spend listening to public comments. Hopefully we can hear everybody. We certainly appreciate your interest, having you all come. We want to hear what you have to say. And with that, I will open the public hearing.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Butler.
with respect to time, there is an outside limit, not beyond 5:30.
I understand that, sir. And a 3-minute time limit. We'll be keeping the 3-minute clock on our computer monitors, and I will call time at the end of 3 minutes. At that time, I'd appreciate if you finish the sentence you're working on and then let the next person speak. So with that, Ms. Carson.
Mr. Chair, the first name is James Clume.
Mr. Clem.
Oh, I apologize, Mr. Chair. James Cole.
Also, sir, if you would give us your full name and your address, and you're welcome to begin. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt the testimony. Those of us who are watching remotely are unable to hear the speaker. I don't know if the mic's turned on. It doesn't appear though that we're hearing any audio come from it.
Can you hear me now?
Mr. Chair, I apologize. That's my
Correct.
fault. I've turned on the mic and reset the time.
Thank you, council member. I think we're okay now. Go ahead.
Okay.
Please repeat, sir, if you don't mind.
My name's
We'll
Jim.
restart your clock.
My name's Jim or James Culm. That's Kulm. I live at 831 East Chateau here in Meridian. I've lived here for since '93. I was born and raised in Idaho. I'm the president of the Idaho Recreation Council. All the laws that pretty much regulate the ATVs and UTVs currently in the state I've been involved with. As far as the restricted plates, and I know something was said about registrations of these vehicles earlier. There is a registration required for the restricted plates. I carry one in my Polaris General that I currently have. I'm on my 4th UTV. I still haven't really heard anything that there's been a problem. I don't agree with having any regulation on it. I agree we've kept the speeds down, we've kept the laws. We are under any laws that any regular automotive pickups, cars, whatever, all those we're legally required to do that. My UTV's got a full roll cage. It's got a passenger compartment. I've got a seat belt that I'm required to wear anytime I use it. And basically, if anybody's got any questions about these rigs, I would like to offer to answer any questions. Like I said, I've had one since 2003 when the Yamaha Rhino first came out. I bought one then, and I've been riding. I'm on my 4th one now. I've wore out 3 of them. I'm on my 4th one. I've taken trips all the way from my place in Cascade. I've got a second home in Cascade. I've driven mine all the way to the Canadian border. I've driven it all over Idaho, all on back roads, all on trails, into Montana. They're as safe as any automobile. I haven't really heard of any problems. Maybe there is a problem locally, but like I said, they are subject to any of the rules that anybody driving a car drives. Guy goes through my neighborhood with a Harley Davidson motorcycle that's so noisy I can't even hear my TV when he drives up the street, and it's okay for him. But I'm getting shot down because I want to drive my Razor or my General. I don't drive it around here. I don't feel comfortable driving it around here, but I do like to drive it down to the local car wash and wash it, over to the service station and fill it up. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, could I ask him a question?
Yes, you may, Mr. Ballard. We have a question, sir.
You bet.
Is Calm?
Culm, Kulm, yes.
Yes, sir. Not being facetious, but I have a general question. How does it benefit a vehicle that cannot exceed 15 miles an hour with other traffic that's 25, 35, 45 on what we call the streets of Meridian? What's the benefit? And I'm just trying to get a handle.
Okay, now you're 15 miles an hour, you're talking about golf carts. My UTV will actually do 70. I could do highway speeds with mine. I don't want to take it out on the highway. I don't want to drive it that fast, but it's capable of it. The first one I had that I bought back in 2003 was capable of 50 miles an hour. So I can keep up with traffic. Anything else?
Thank you, sir. Ms. Carson?
Mr. Chair, I will note also there are 4 names on the list that are marked opposed to the ordinance that did not want to testify, just so the commissioners do know. So the second name to testify is David Petrovier.
Mr. Petrovia? Welcome.
Tell me when we're ready.
Clock's running.
You can go ahead.
All right. David Petroviak. I'm a Meridian resident at 2116 Aspen Cove Drive. I've owned a razor for a number of years and I use it responsibly, but it's really not about me. It's about the majority of the citizens. I think what the commissioners and maybe the city don't understand is there's a great number of families and elderly who use golf carts for in-neighborhood transportation. This would become illegal. There are people who use razors, ATVs, UTVs to get their kids to and from the pools in the neighborhoods. If we start eliminating this, these law-abiding citizens are going to clog up the parking lot. I've taken my razor from my home here all the way out Floating Feather, Hill Road, clear downtown Boise, fueled up, gone all the way beyond Idaho City. My wife and I go up there, have lunch, take the dirt roads. It's a great thing to do. There is no parking for a truck and trailer in downtown Boise. This would make that trip illegal. You're talking about inconveniencing the citizens who don't want to be inconvenienced. Responsible, law-abiding people who use these vehicles in accordance with the law. I've never had anything from a law officer but a wave and a smile. The majority of people don't operate these things poorly. We're talking about a few bad apples. Motorcycles are much less safe than any ATV or UTV. Mine has 5-point harnesses, racing seats, a full roll bar. I have a turn signal kit. Mine's equipped as far as safety signals and everything, every bit as good as any car on the road. I drive BMWs and Audis for vehicles every day. That razor's equipped just as good. It's even safer with the roll bar. We're talking about taking grandparents who pick their kids up at school just over here in Meridian and making that illegal. Now, we all stay off highways. We know that's illegal. We don't exceed the speed limit because we're not looking to get in trouble. Including more laws just employs more attorneys. It doesn't help the citizens in this case. There are already laws that we have to abide by, or the officer will pull us over and ticket us, or worse. So I put 3,000 miles on my UTV in a year. My father's an elderly and he lives out here in Meridian. I've loaded up, because he has a large property, I've loaded up my razor with the chainsaw and other equipment to go over and cut a tree down on his property. That way I could drive back on the property, not in my big truck that's a diesel that would sink into his lawn and destroy his property, drive right up to the tree, take my equipment out, hundreds of pounds of equipment, and take this tree down. Again, the proposed ordinances would make that illegal. I'm against it 100%. I'm part of 3 ATV groups where we get together and go out and ride in the hills, over 2,000 people. If they weren't working people who had to work until 6 or 7 at night, they would have been here or been online. So there are a lot of us. Big mistake to change the law to make it less easy to use these, less convenient for the people who need them. And I'm talking about friends I have, their amputees and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the next name is Stephen Appel.
Welcome.
Welcome. Hi, how you guys doing today? I'm Steve Appel. I live at 225 West Maple, right around the corner from you guys. He hit so many great points about ATV, UTV usage on the streets here. It benefits people more than you can even know. And both the 2 gentlemen ahead of me, Jim Cum and David here, hit on some points that I was going to hit on, but they took care of it. So I think that it's really unfair to do it because from what we're understanding, I'm an administration on Idaho Razor Crew. We have over 6,100 members. We've been in touch with the police department and they basically told us that it's really about their clarity about how to write tickets, what to enforce, more so than it is infractions and citations that are happening with UTV usage on the roads. When we load up to go for an excursion, if we're leaving for a weekend, many of UTV owners have either big toy haulers or toy up racks, which is a rack that it goes over the pickup truck. You can't fuel when it's on top of a rack. You can't do that. It's 8 foot off the ground. It's dangerous as heck. If to take a 30-foot or a 35-foot toy hauler to a gas station, drop the ramp, back your UTV out to load it up or to fuel it up at a gas station, being inconvenience to everybody else, the safety is just something of great concern. And he hit it on the head. Most of us do not want tickets from police officers or to get involved in an accident. These vehicles are very well equipped. They're as fast, if not faster, than some cars on the roads with roll bars, seat belts, lights, brake lights, tail lights, indicator lights, you name it, they're equipped very well. I think the fact that you guys are lumping golf carts into UTVs is absolutely just a little bit ridiculous. They're completely different machines. A vehicle that does only 15 miles an hour on a road, yes, it's going to create a hassle. But as David said, they do upwards 70, 80 miles an hour. The new ones even can do up to 90 miles an hour. Nobody wants to do that on road streets. But here's the concern is if you have an officer that sees somebody test driving their car, as you guys worded it, because I read the whole ordinance. If somebody's test driving their car and then an officer decides that he wants to write him a ticket, that's a little difficult. Controlled access roads, highways, busy intersections, stuff of that nature. We totally get that. But other than that, I don't see any reason for it. And we totally oppose this law.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
Mr. Appel?
Sir? We have a question from Commissioner Ballard.
I'm so sorry.
David Ballard, Mr. Appel.
We met before. We met last meeting.
Yes, invited you back for the public comment. I appreciate you coming back. I don't see many of these ATVs, UTVs on the streets.
Correct. It's not like, in certain situations, people do use them. I've used them here. Another thing too is like just fueling up. If you have your toy hauler, it's all loaded up and you got to run to the store or whatever. It's really hard to detach or take your toy hauler to the local market and put 65 feet inside of a parking lot. You don't see them that much because most people don't try and just drive them around everywhere for day-to-day transportation. It's that once in a while where you have to. So if you're forced to go ahead and use it, say you only have one car and you put all your money into buying UTV, because I don't think any of you guys understand what it does for us, especially during COVID. Everybody was cooped up for so long. That is a great way for people to go out and safely blow off steam and not go absolutely crazy like half the world's been doing since we've all been locked down. I think it's a really poor decision to make it illegal for them to be on any roadways. It's not well thought through at all. It's just not. And like I said, we've been in contact with Meridian Police Department trying to get records of the citations and complaints, and we haven't gotten satisfied on that. Never sent an email. There's been communication. Somebody else here has been in communication. They haven't provided it. We wanted to kind of see the reasons why these were being proposed. The only reason we were given that is that, well, the police department needs clarity on where to write a ticket or how to write a ticket. Well, that seems like an issue that the police department needs to get together with the state of Idaho and get more clarity on the laws, not make new ones, not just write a bunch of new ones. That's just not fair. It's an infringement upon our rights. We pay taxes. We pay for these roads.
Another question, sir.
Sure.
When the ATV encounters a car or a truck or a pickup, what's the result of those accidents?
So I can repeat the question, Mr. Chair, if that's easier. I think it's not picking up on the mic very well. The question was, when an ATV encounters a vehicle on the road, what's the result of the encounter if there's an accident?
Yeah, It's got a seat, it's got harnesses or a seat belt, a roll bar around it, and they all come standard with roll bars around them. So if you're going to impose these laws upon UTVs, you might as well make it illegal for motorcycles to be on the street too, because they're actually more dangerous and they ride with no helmet. So, I mean, what's it? Don't know of any instances. I haven't heard any. Again, we've tried to be in communication with the police department to find out what incidences were the justification for this proposal. We have gotten no response from them. We've gotten none at all. Just we were told that, well, we're kind of really having a hard time with understanding the laws, that because you guys even said it, or the Miss Claire, whatever her name is, I'm sorry, said that it's kind of a gray area with the state and the laws that have been written by ACHD. I think that there's probably more footwork you guys could do to get better clarity on the laws instead of just making it, okay, we're just going to pull the rights away. You guys can't put them on the streets except for test driving and loading. And what if you have somebody that lives on a main corridor or on a busy street and they have to load up there? What's it? So a police officer is allowed to make the decision whether he writes him a ticket or not. That's a horrible way to start a vacation. Just saying, I wish you guys would reconsider. We all are pretty much I can't speak for everyone, but the people that I associate myself with, we obey the laws. We want to keep our kids safe. We don't want accidents. We don't want these things happening. And we don't want to be
One question, sir.
Yeah.
So is it your position that you're currently entitled to drive this anywhere you want?
No, sir. There's certain roads that we can't be on.
And what are those roads that you can't?
Any main corridor or access, controlled access, basically the main streets. Anywhere under any state highway that's over 45 miles an hour, we're not allowed to be on them. We don't go on those. But like around my neighborhood, where I'm nowhere near a major corridor or a main street, if an officer decides that I'm not doing what he thinks I should be doing, he should be allowed to write me a ticket for it. I don't think that's fair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Mr. Chair, the next name on the list is John Spencer.
Thank you for coming. Next.
I'll note that that was in opposition. The next name on the list is Dustin Ballantyne.
Welcome. Commissioners, Sergeant, and staff. My name is Dustin Ballantyne, 1930 East Carroll Street in Meridian. I come before you today due to this proposed ordinance, and I've been a member of the community now for going on 11 years. I'm a great outdoor enthusiast. I'm a supporter in the community. I try to involve myself and my family with everything that goes on around here, and I use my ATV to get to those events. I have a long timeline of events with discussion with the Meridian Police Department, the Deputy City Attorney, and other local law enforcement agencies, attorneys, group representatives. To explain this, I'd be going way beyond my 3 minutes allowed. In short, there's no other law enforcement agency that I've talked to that has any problem with this. And then I'm talking about county sheriffs, sergeants of the highway patrol, city police chiefs and stuff like that. I'm not really sure how this all come about, other than maybe possibly one officer's misinterpretation of the current Idaho laws. As stated before, there's already laws that govern our operation. I do agree that there shouldn't be anybody riding on state highways, and that being Highway 55, 44, 2021. Those highways are obviously above 45 miles an hour as regulated. Many of the towns around us welcome ATV, UTV usage. Look at McCall. Go up to McCall. They welcome it up there. Because it's a less traffic congestion for them. So I think that putting this ordinance in place is not the best, because you're adding more people or more vehicles when you could be downsizing. In fact, 2 other states, Montana and Utah, allow full registration of these vehicles and operate on any highway at any speed other than interstate highways. I'm asking you today to dismiss this proposed ordinance in regards to the ATV and UTV operation. Can't speak on the golf carts because it's not even in the same operation. Due to the lack of credible evidence by the sponsors. This ordinance has no merit and takes away from our right to operate safely, legally, and responsibly within the city of Meridian, according to the state Idaho law 49-426. Appreciate all your time.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
would the speaker be open to a question?
sir. Councilmember Kavanagh has a question for you, if you could hear it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I didn't mean for you to get all the way back to your seat and then get called back up. Appreciate you sharing some testimony about other municipalities and their ordinances. And I think we can all agree there's quite a bit of difference between Meridian and McCall. It sounds like you've done some extensive research. I'm hoping you could maybe fill myself and the commission about what some of the surrounding municipalities around Meridian do. Are these prohibited in Boise or Nampa, Eagle, Cuna, Star?
That's negative. They are not. Although the city of Boise has an ordinance against ATVs, their UTV law, ordinance 10-10-10 does not excludes UTVs from that up to 74 inches wide.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, moving on to the last few in-person names that signed up, there is another opposition that did not want to testify, just to note for the commission. The next name on the list is Terrell Jarrett.
Welcome.
My name is Terrell Jarrett. I live at 624 West Broadway Avenue. I've lived there since '63. I have a side-by-side. They also call them UTVs. And my UTV is manufactured by Rebel Motor Power Sports. It comes with steel doors, steel body. Engine is in the back, 3-cylinder automotive engine. It has all the bells and whistles from the get-go, right out of the box. And it's street legal by the manufacturer in 50 states. So with your ordinance, you're trying to lump ATVs, golf carts, and side-by-sides all together. You got to separate them. I don't know of anybody that uses a side-by-side to go to a golf course to play golf. You know, I already thought Meridian had an ordinance that clearly states that golf carts was to be used at golf courses and in around a golf course. And side-by-sides has a definition different from that of a ATV, because an ATV, you have to climb on it, you straddle it, and you have handlebars. You operate the throttle with your thumb, but side-by-sides and UTVs, you have seat belts, roll cage, bucket seats, steering wheel, brake pedal, gas pedal that's operated with your foot. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions?
Don't believe so. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, the next name on the list is Glenn Humphreys. If there's anyone in the lobby who wants to join us in chambers, there are 2 open chairs.
Welcome, sir. Your name and address, please.
Glenn Humphreys, 6880 North Pyra Avenue, Meridian. My experience is a little bit different from the folks I've heard testify so far. I spent 35 years in law enforcement in California. So where I come from, there was something called the California Vehicle Code, which covered everything involving vehicles, from golf carts, motor vehicles, ATVs, UTVs. When I got here, I've been in Idaho 11 years. Idaho had a different approach to things, which I've seen over the years. I'm a volunteer at Rocky Mountain High School. I work in a football program there. I purchased a UTV side-by-side from Can-Am last year, and before doing so, I checked with the police department. I did not speak with the sergeant. I spoke with one of his motor officers, and I'm not here to place blame or to push anything. I'm just trying to make a point about the operation and what I did to make it, quote, street legal, by having it registered properly, having the turn indicators, horn, tail lights, brake lights, proper mirrors, everything that made it, quote, street legal in the definition of such. I put 700 miles on it so far, running back and forth from my house in Spurwing Greens to Rocky Mountain to work on the football program and to use it there. The map that the attorney showed referenced what are collectors and what are highways and such appears to be different from what my interpretation is. I'm looking to utilize it on all the roadways that I was told would be legal. Again, I'm not placing blame. Understand how laws change and things come into play. But this does not fall in the realm of a golf cart or a ATV. The side-by-sides or UTVs are a totally different operation and what's expected of the person operating, from the seat belts to the roll bars to the metal doors to turn indicators, mirrors, brakes, and accelerators. So my point is, I think we're overreaching when we try to put UTVs in with golf carts and try to cover the whole thing and make an ordinance to cover the enforcement thereof.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the last speaker.
Yes, Mr. Lancaster.
Yeah, Mr. A quick question for you. So, not being an expert on what makes a vehicle street legal or not, it certainly sounds like your vehicle has a lot of functions that a car would have. My question for you is your vehicle registered as, a car or a truck, a motor vehicle, or is it registered as something else, licensed as something else, like an off-highway vehicle?
It has the off-highway restricted plate, which allows you to operate on the Forest Service roads. And I put a regular license plate on it with no problem. I'd registered it if that was what the state deemed was appropriate. That's the way I'd register it. It has insurance, just like all my other vehicles. And I operate it obviously in a safe manner and take it from the house to the school where I utilize it, and up in the mountains, wherever also. But again, yes, it's registered as the state tells me to register it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, at this point, the sign-up sheet for in-person is complete. If there's anybody still waiting in person, we will get you after Zoom. So at this point, I would ask anybody who's on Zoom and wants to speak to raise their hand. I see Mr. Chris Williams already has his hand raised, so I'll go ahead and allow him to speak next.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can,
Okay.
sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. First and foremost, I am against any new regulations on this, much as a lot of the prior speakers.
Sir, could we stop you a moment to get your name and address, please?
Yes, my apologies. Chris Williams, 4476 North Girasolo Avenue here in Meridian.
Thank you.
I am completely against changing any of the regulations that, or excuse me, I should say the proposed regulations that you have against those. Everything that I've heard today appears that we already have laws in place, and there's been no compelling evidence or anything that's been presented, at least that I've heard today, to change that. Much like a previous speaker, I actually myself, not knowing that they've reached out to Meridian PD, on January 8th of this year, I reached out to the city and the City Meridian Police Department, and I asked for any complaints, citations, anything that they had from anywhere from 2016 up through the end of 2020 regarding UTVs, side-by-sides, things of that nature. they immediately got back to me about 24 hours later with my official letter saying that there was no data on there and that they don't track that data. Not to say that it's not out there, but again, listening even to the sergeant that spoke earlier for transportation with the Meridian Police Department, it sounds that it's more of an education issue amongst the officers, or some of the officers, I should say, that really needs to be a training event as opposed to changing the laws or adding additional laws onto there. Much as, you know, we said about fueling, you know, some of us, if we have toy haulers, it is a nuisance to other people, not just us, not an inconvenience to us to fill up, or when we have the racks over our trucks to do that. You know, in my community alone, I see golf carts. There's no golf courses around in my community. I'm in Bridge Tower West. People, you know, driving their golf carts probably over to their neighbor's house or driving their kids to the pool, the local community pool, to the playground. They're doing it in a safe manner. No complaints to my knowledge. So again, you know, with the proposed change, that would make those things illegal for those individuals to do. You know, I've seen them drive them, you know, to go get the mail in the community mailboxes. It's just really unnecessary is really what it gives to. And I realize we haven't had this in years. Personal, in a previous community I lived in Meridian about, what was it, 3-4 years ago during what we'd call Snowmageddon, I often helped quite a few of my neighbors out just on my ATVs alone, helping them just get out of their driveway on the main road. So, you know, most of us, and I got to be honest, I've never seen an ATV, not to say a side-by-side on the main road. I'm not driving my ATV down Linder Road, down Eagle Road, down Chinden. No, we know the laws in the place and we abide by them. So I just kindly ask that you guys please reconsider and not go through with this proposed change.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone have a question for Mr. Williams?
Mr. Chair, the next in-person name is Tom Zumwalt.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Zumwalt. I live at.
Could you speak into that? Yeah, that left mic.
Is that better?
Thank you, better. Thank you.
Okay. My name's Tom Zumwalt and I live at 4850 North Black Cat Road in Meridian. And I have had a UTV. Well, like Jim, I've had 4 of them. I have been stopped 4, 5, 6 times. I lost track. The first time I got stopped was by an officer named Stoy. He wrote me a ticket for no mud flaps, cited the Idaho code that is not applicable to UTVs, and told me, you'll probably deny it, but told me right to my face that he didn't think these things were safe to be on the road. And if he wrote me the ticket, I'd at least have to go to the trouble of getting it dismissed. That's what I got told by him. Another time I got stopped by an officer named Severson. He actually called the prosecuting attorney and tried to find something to write me a ticket for. And they couldn't find anything that I was doing wrong. This is just driving down the road, both times, minding my own business, not bothering anybody, not speeding, not doing anything, and getting stopped. I'm opposed to this ordinance. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I will just note, there are a few still on Zoom. If any of you would like to speak, if you're on a phone, you can press *9. If you're on your computer, you can use the raise your hand function, press Alt-Y if you're on Windows, or Option-Y if you're on Mac. Give a couple minutes for them to raise their hand. At this point, if there's anybody in the lobby who has not spoken and did not have a chance to sign up as the sheets were picked up, I'd invite you in. All right, Mr. Chair, it doesn't look like there's anybody in the lobby who's coming in to speak, and I don't see any more hands raised on Zoom. I will just note there were several public comments online as well. The link to those are in the memo of your packet. If you'd like to review those comments, as of now, there's 44 entries. That does not mean 44 comments. Some of those entries have more than one person, but there are 44 entries. That link is in the packet in the memo for this item. I think that closes our public comments, if the commission wants to close public comments.
Okay, with no one else wishing to speak, I will close the public hearing at straight up 5 o'clock and ask the commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I just want to say I really appreciate people coming in to testify and all the public comments. The vast majority of them were, very, respectful and well written. And I think in these times especially, it's great to see people who can disagree without being disagreeable. With that said, I know there's a bunch of different ways to go about this. I think it's clear, and I think Ms. Kane would agree that there's some language to clean up and some minor edits. And I know there are multiple, concerns about maybe other exceptions regarding, landscaping, snowmobiles, or it's not snowmobiles, snow plowing, et cetera, community service things. I know we can discuss that. But one thing I did want to just mention, because I want to make sure that we're clear about things, is a lot of the comments mentioned that these vehicles are just as safe as cars. And I did a little research, and I'm not proclaiming to be an expert, and I don't want to fearmonger by any means, but I do think that that's quite a questionable claim. I think if you look at the data, fatalities relating to UTVs and ATVs have continued to increase. They have less stability due to their usually narrower frames, lower pressure tires in most cases. There have been multiple recalls by major companies, including Polaris, for tip over issues. They have higher fatality rates than the normal, automobiles as registered. Two-thirds of accidents in one study across 9 states showed that 2/3 of those accidents had a passenger ejected because seatbelt use is not necessarily the norm. So I appreciate a lot of the individuals coming in being law-abiding citizens, and I appreciate the intent to follow the law as it is. But I think the core issue that the police department is struggling with is the people who aren't necessarily following the law and who aren't in those shoes. And there's confusion around the fact that they are not following the law. So I'm happy to share any of the, if anyone wants to contact me with any of the things that I've looked at. Again, I'm not professing to be an expert by any means, but I just want to make sure we're on, a common ground of understanding of the claims that these are just as safe as any other vehicle are not quite as accurate as I think some people intend them to be.
We've closed the public hearing. Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Chairman, I'll echo what Commissioner Smith said as far as the engagement of those that have participated today in writing. It has been interesting to hear. I think the fact that these types of vehicles have what appear to be called, what are they, special restriction registration. I mean, by definition, these are different vehicles. Most of the testimony that we've heard, and I've started skimming through the written comments, most of them appear to be geared towards UTVs as opposed to ATVs, and certainly not golf carts. You know, the ordinance already exists for golf carts. So I think it's interesting, but it does appear that there is a differentiation between ATVs, UTVs, and normal motor vehicles. So it does seem that it's not out of place to treat them differently. With that said, I do think, based on the conversation we had with Ms. Kane earlier, that, we should hold any further movement on the ordinance, if you will, to make some revisions that were discussed, and then take it up again, but with I guess with my recommendation that we move forward with it once there's some revisions made to it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. I appreciate.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ballard has the floor, Tom. Just a moment.
So I
Oh,
appreciate.
I can't hear him. I'm sorry.
Does that work?
I can hear you, Mr. Ballard.
Appreciate the public coming in. I'm looking at this issue and I'm going, what problem are we trying to solve? And at this point, I would say that I'm not sure that the problem has been defined. So I can't say what the solution is. I would echo Mr. Lancaster's comments that I would like to see additional information to address what problem we are trying to solve. We allow scooters on the street, we allow bikes on the street, we allow motorcycles on the street, different vehicles. I would want to see some additional information as to what issue we're trying to solve. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I appreciate the comments today. It kind of does give you a different perspective when, I mean, I own UTVs, I own ATVs. They happen to be in Atlanta, Idaho, so I don't have that access down here to drive them, but to think about driving them to the pool or gassing them up before I'm going to take them out and load. I mean, those are all valid points that I didn't consider. I've got gasoline up there. So it kind of gives us a different perspective that, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to consider after we circle back and maybe I've read the online comments and they're, out of all of them, I think I found 2 that wanted to change it and were for it out of 40 some that were there. So I think we need to give it some consideration before we move on.
Mr. Leclerc. I don't see Mr. Leclerc on the screen. Are you still out there, Mr. Leclerc?
Mr. Chair, I don't see him on Zoom at all.
Okay.
It looks
Other-
like he dropped off.
Other commissioners' comments?
Mr. Leclerc just rejoined us. It looks like he had a technical issue.
Mr. Leclerc, are you back with us?
I hope so.
Did you wish to speak?
It did sound like at the beginning of our presentations, especially with the Q&A for Mrs. Kane, we do have some areas to redraft this, and I think it needs some work. And so if the commission wants to refer this back to our subcommittee, we can pick this up again and see if we can't get a better version of it. maybe separate the 3 categories or 4 categories of vehicles and see if we can't get this to be a more functional version of what we have today. So that's the comments I have. We're willing, certainly willing to work on this some more if that's the direction we want to go. We did get a lot of opposition testimony, so be interested to know if there's commissioners who think it's a bad idea to go forward and we should just stop now. And so, so any of you who have those thoughts, let us know, and it might save us some work. But I think, as Commissioner Smith said, I think there's room to get this better, and I think we can have a good local ordinance that our police department can carry out. Right now, they don't really have any guidance for these vehicles, and the last gentleman that testified gave us examples, with police officers calling to find out what they can do for what they think is an unsafe situation. And so that's a clear goal of this, is to clarify the code, our code for them. And so those are my thoughts. I think there's work to do, and we're happy to pick it up and work it some more.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, council member.
Thank you, Mr. President Steed. I try not to weigh in these proceedings. I really value the commission, but Mr. Leclerc's comments at least I think compelled me to provide some suggestions or potential recommendations. First, thanks to the commission for taking this up. I know you as a body have wanted to weigh into more of the meatier issues, recognizing that sometimes that brings forth good questions, hard questions, frankly, from the public. And I appreciate your willingness to at least explore this issue. And if there is a common sense approach that you think that you can bring forth, that you continue to do that. My ask would be is that you be timely on this. As is often the case when the public starts to talk about these issues, there is great interest in their participation. And I just would encourage you to move forth on this as expediently as you can, hopefully by our next meeting, so that the public is able to kind of follow the bouncing ball and continue to have opportunity to weigh in. I don't have an opinion one way or another. I, like many of you, listened to the compelling testimony today and what we read online, and it's caused, I think, some good questions for myself as well. So I'm looking forward to see what the commission does. I just, like I said, would encourage you to do it sooner rather than later.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Leclerc asked the question, and I would repeat it. What is the problem that a solution is being sought for? I would ask for clarification as to what issue is being addressed. I can see a difference between golf carts and UTVs. They're different pieces of equipment. Different speed regulation. So his challenge, maybe that's the wrong term, is what is the issue to be solved? That's what I'd ask for. Clarification as to what's the problem.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I appreciate that question, and I think those of us on the subcommittee have a pretty good general idea of the focus, and I think there's a lot of feedback for us to work on. So I think we need to do. I personally think it would behoove us to remit this back to the subcommittee and to have the subcommittee, present this again at our next meeting, following the subcommittee meeting that day. And I think that gives us time to, make the simple edits, the ones that are, typographical issues or just kind of definition issues, but also to, take the time to not only just think about what the statute itself says, but actually communicate, the real problem that we're getting at, and the reason for each piece of the statute. So with that, I don't want to, if anyone else had anything to say, I don't want to do that, but I would move to remit this back to the subcommittee to be heard, to be worked on, and then presented again at our meeting next month.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Smith, a second by Commissioner Lancaster. Any discussion? Motion.
Chair, that is to follow the council person's request timely. So the committee is going to meet again and present a report at our next meeting, and then we call for the vote. And I know I'm discussing the motion itself, but I wanted to be clear what we're voting on.
The motion, as I heard it and understood it, was to remit this to the subcommittee for further discussion and to, in particular, look at the issues regarding the way the current proposal is written and to get that cleaned up.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I think, if there wants to be some discussion of, I don't know if this needs to happen now, of whether the next meeting, when this would be presented, would be another public hearing or not, or just normal meeting. That might be worth discussing as well, but I have no preference one way or the other, just another thought.
There's Mud, sir.
Well, we'll get a report, so let's call for the vote, if you will.
Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay was Mr. Lewis, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, it is remitted. Mr. Leclerc, you are chair of that subcommittee. I will
Mr. Chair.
ask you to look at when you might be able to meet on this. I also heard the council members' comments, but I think we have the ability to work at our own pace. We can't figure out how to do it any quicker, we won't. Yes, ma'am.
I think we have to clarify in the minutes when there's an opposition. Was there anybody who was abstaining, or was everybody who didn't have a nay a yay?
Everybody was an A, is that correct, commissioners?
Yes.
Except for Mr. Lewis's nay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you all. Thank you to everyone who came today. We did hear you. We did listen to you. I have no idea what the end result's going to be because I don't have a crystal ball. But we do thank you very much for your time and input. Okay, Sergeant Frazier, anything of momentous note to be reported by the police department?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I don't have many updates over the last month period. The only thing I do have is February 1st begins an OHS ITD aggressive driving enforcement emphasis, and we will be participating in that just like we participate in all of those emphasis enforcement actions. And unless anybody has any questions about anything, that's all I've got.
Any questions for the sergeant? Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Carson, in light of the time, can we pass on item 5, the Compass High Capacity Transit Survey report?
I'm sorry, sir, can you repeat that?
Can we pass that to the next meeting, the Compass report?
The high capacity transit survey?
Yes, ma'am.
I would ask Rachel, I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. This is a timely issue, so if we could give her just maybe 5 minutes to tell you about it.
Rachel, can you, not to tell you you've got 5 minutes, but can you do it in a short period of time?
Mr. Chair, yes, I could just briefly talk about the survey.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Compass right now has a survey open about high capacity transit options for the Treasure Valley. It is an online survey. You can find it on our website, compassidaho.org. And I had presented this high capacity transit item to you in the past when we were preparing to do a study, and that study is now complete. It looked at the high capacity transit options for the region and what we should be pursuing. So this public survey builds on that. You can find both on our website, and the survey hopes to tell us if people are interested in high capacity transit in the region and which options would fit best if they are. So that's open now until February 27th. We hope you all will take it and share it with others. It will feed into our long range plan, Communities in Motion 2050. And yeah, I think that's the short of it.
Thank you very much. So February 27, you have until then to go on the Compass website and take the high capacity transit survey. I have done it. It's somewhat educational for a survey. It tells you a little bit about what different terminology means, and be very helpful as many responses as they could get to that. Okay, next item is the Transportation Prioritization Subcommittee. At the last meeting, there was a very interesting, unexpected to me, discussion of the ACHD prioritization information. And because of the time crunch, we made some very quick amendments to it as presented and sent it forward to the city council as we were wont to do. However, it appeared to me at that time there was additional work that was called for or interest that commissioners were interested in doing. And therefore, with that, I've initiated the creation of a additional standing subcommittee to this group to be called the Transportation Prioritization Subcommittee. And I would like to recommend that that be made up of 4 members, which is the legal maximum for a subcommittee. Mr. Lancaster, Mr. Hopkins, Mr. Lewis, and Mr. Smith. And with that, I would ask, is there a motion to create such a subcommittee?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lewis. So moved. Second by Mr. Hopkins. We have a motion and a second. Discussion, please. No discussion, therefore we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. I will leave it to that group of gentlemen to among themselves decide meeting place and time, and also to them to select their own chairman. We would like, please, a report for the next meeting of this group in terms of what your plans are on the topic. Okay, Mrs. Carson.
Mr. Chair, if I can ask a question, were you asking them to report or were you asking them to have their next meeting set?
I was asking them to let us know what their plans are.
Okay, just making sure.
If they report that they met the day before, that's one thing. If they report they plan to meet, that's okay too.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, to make sure if I needed to set up a meeting.
Don't expect anything by the time we leave the building here in a few minutes.
The staff communications, for the sake of time, I will assume that you read the staff communications. There were some questions last month about the Eagle Lake Hazel presentation. There is clarification to those questions. In that staff communications, the link to the survey for Compass, the high capacity transit survey that we just spoke about, is in there as well. I would also congratulate Chair Steed on being nominated to the Capital Investment Citizens Advisory Committee by the mayor.
Yeah, who?
Yeah, so he's been nominated to that. We will bring that forward. I assume there's an appointment, so when that happens, we'll bring that forward as well. And the rest are just some citizen questions, and that is the staff communication in a flash. If there are any questions, I'll stand for those.
Questions on staff communications from Mrs. Carson? I have told her directly, and I want to tell her publicly, that I do appreciate the latest iteration of organization and presentation of that information. I think it's much easier to follow, probably because I'm guessing she has a little bit more time to put into it than previous people may have, but I do appreciate it, and thank you very much. Also, last item on the new business agenda is the Second Street Vision by Mrs. Carson.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to, should we extend the meeting for that, or do you?
You're the one that's going to present it, you tell me.
I'm not sure that I can present that in 5 minutes.
You need 10 minutes, I'll move that we extend it to 5:40.
We have a motion to extend to 5:40. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lancaster. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. You have 15 minutes, 14 and a half.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the presentation is there in your packet, and I will pull that up on screen as well. Share my screen here. So the vision here is for Second Street to have some placemaking. This is an area in downtown Meridian, I'm sure you're all familiar with, here at Second Street, between Broadway and Idaho, that we've been focusing some efforts just to maximize and create some places. There's a lot of things going on around that area. There's some residential units and some new businesses coming in around that, which is one of the reasons that we've focused in on that area. On the screen here, you'll see the partners. So we've been discussing with the Meridian Development Corporation. We've also spoke to the downtown stakeholders to discuss some alternate cross sections for that. And we plan to continue engaging these partners throughout the process. Our goal is to create a place that's for the community to gather and designed with the community's input. Stop me at any point if there's questions, because I am just trying to get through this 10 minutes. So the vision here is, or in developing the project, we are in the vision stage right now. These steps listed are not linear, rather just their to-dos. We've not finalized any cross sections yet. We just wanted to bring this to the Transportation Commission and see if there are any flaws that you see. We also took this to the ACHD Commission as well. And as I said, we took it to the stakeholders. We're in the beginning steps to establish funding and create a timeline for this. And our next step would be to design. And again, we would have the public involved with that. We foresee construction being completed in conjunction with adjacent development. We're hoping that would occur around 2022. So the Destination Downtown Plan calls out East 2nd Street to be a charming downtown street that caters to social experiences with unique enhancements. So our scope would be here from Broadway to Idaho, which is in the newly formed Meridian Development Corporation's newly formed Union Urban Renewal District. There are considerations of possibly continuing the theme to Pine in the future. Not necessarily the exact cross section that we designed for Second, but just the theme of having that be a place we would want people to gather. We're not proposing to vacate the right-of-way or prohibit vehicles. We are envisioning some limited on-street parking. And currently there is 80 feet of right-of-way to work within for that cross-section. We recognize that there are mid-block alleys for deliveries on either side, and there's still work to be done on the treatment of those alleys in relation to the Second Street design. So here's some local examples of what we're thinking about. There are many existing and proposed uses in the downtown area, as I alluded to earlier, the up and coming new employment center and residential uses. We believe Second Street can serve a greater good if rebuilt as a pedestrian core to those uses. So our vision includes a curbless design that would be done with accessibility and equity in mind. We want this to be a place of inclusion for all community users. So here's some examples that show how this concept's been successful in the regional area. I would note that Indian Creek Plaza is a full pedestrian use, and that's not what we're proposing. It's just an example of a placemaking that's more recent, that's been very successful. So our vision would be to have this Second Street block become an iconic gathering place that's unique to Meridian. So we're not wanting to copy any of those previous designs. We really want to make this unique to our city. We would follow the set historic downtown standards in our design to blend this into the rest of downtown, but we would highlight the rich history and culture of Meridian with nods to rail, irrigation, and our agricultural history through public art and displays. As I'm sure you're probably aware, this is on the Meridian Historic Walking Tour. So it's already a part of that. So this would just provide even more ways for the community to engage with that tour and with their city. So we're not just looking at place making. We also really want to look into the activation, place activation to really get the community involved in this core that we're looking at as a gathering place. So the design we would hope would bring out street markets, festivals. Occasionally that would justify restricting traffic on the block. We did invite the stakeholders from downtown to review the concept with us. They were supportive. They were ready to activate the space with us, and they seemed just as excited about this project as we are on the staff. So at this point, I would just stand for any questions or comments, concerns that you have regarding Second Street and a placemaking effort there.
I do have a question. What is the time frame on this? What more are we going to hear? At what point might we be asked to recommend or not recommend? Give us a little bit of the, speaking of vision, what's the vision for this vision?
Yeah, definitely. So the next step would be starting to look at design and what pieces those stakeholders really want to have in that block, or that the Transportation Commission would want, the staff would want, and really starting to put some designs into place. As far as construction goes, as I said, we plan to do that with the neighboring construction, the development of the block next to it. We would kind of want this to be done in conjunction with that. So the timeline for that is really dependent on when that block gets developed, which is something that we don't know at this point. But we do want to move this conversation forward and go ahead and start looking through the design.
And to continue, so this item is more of a informational item than an action item.
Correct. This isn't.
You know, the staff nor council are looking for any decisions on our part.
There are no, we're not looking for any decisions. We are just trying to get early in the process if there's any fatal flaws with the vision before we start design. We're just trying to engage. This is one of the projects that we want to engage really early. We want to engage the public, the stakeholders, the appointed officials to make sure that everybody's involved in the design as best we can.
We certainly appreciate that. Is the design budgeted by the city?
Not,
Or the down,
not that I'm aware of at this point.
is it going to be done in-house?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Questions, commissioners? Yes, sir.
Miranda, so you guys did this once before on a street. We had put those placeholders in and remember that? Is it Idaho Street?
It was Idaho.
On Idaho Avenue, yes.
The parklets.
And how did that go? I mean, it didn't seem like that got a whole lot of traction from my point of view.
So I may have to defer to Caleb if he's on. I wasn't working for the city when that happened, so I'm not sure. And it looks like he might not be on anymore. But I can follow up on that and make sure I provide that in staff communications for the next meeting.
Other
Mr. Chair,
questions,
I'm here if
comments
you
by
want.
Commissioners?
Oh, Caleb's back.
Was that Caleb?
Mhm.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hopkins, I mean, to your question, it kind of depends on who you asked. I don't know that I would characterize it as a success, the placemaking that we did on Idaho Avenue. It was an experiment. It was lighter, quicker, cheaper. What Miranda just kind of walked you through on Second Street would be an ultimate rebuild of Second Street. So it wouldn't be decking and planters that are an interim condition, but more a permanent, total redo of the streetscape. There would be some elements we could probably keep, some of the brick pavers and some of the curb line may be able to stay. But this is different than that, although it's just a block away from that project. Again, there were some pros and cons to that, but there's a different kind of your discussion with the ATV, UTV ordinance, a different problem we're trying to solve here, or a different outcome we're looking for. There really is an opportunity with the adjacent civic block where the Compass VRT building is and the Unbound Library and RFP really activating this roadway to have the street fairs and some of those things that Miranda talked about, which is different than Idaho Avenue. Improvements to the right of way, but a lot of differences as well.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any further questions, comments?
One question for Ms. Carson. Ms. Carson, what is your ask of us today?
My ask would just be if there are any comments or any concerns with just the initial vision. I know I haven't shown you any actual design, just the initial vision of having a street that occasionally might be shut down for traffic and has some redesign.
Let's take the next look. Move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster.
in the conversations had so far, or has there been any concern about parking going away on Second Street? I know I've parked there before, so I don't know how often it's used, but when it's used, it seems like it's used, right? Whether there's something at the community center there or whatnot. So I'm just curious if that's come up as a big concern or not.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lancaster, when we spoke with the stakeholders, there weren't concerns about traffic, or I'm sorry, about parking. Initially, we had thought perhaps we would make this a one-way street, but after speaking with the stakeholders and with ACHD Commission, we've kind of dropped that plan and we're sticking with the two-way street. That's the only concern that's come up at this point. There's not a lot of concern about limiting traffic or limiting parking. We're not proposing to do away with parking, just limiting it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioner questions or comments?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I don't have too much feedback other than, obviously I think a lot of the devil's going to be in the details here. But I really support and want to encourage this, this vision and this discussion. And if there's anything that I can do to help out, I am happy to. I really like this idea, and I think this would be a valuable addition to our community.
Thank you.
Pending details, obviously.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Taysom.
Yes, I do want to say that with the new building going up across the street from my office at Valley Regional Transit, I do believe they're going to be providing a parking garage as part of that as well. So it's not free on-street parking, but for larger events such as Dairy Days, there should be additional parking available.
Thank you. Anyone else? You've got a whole minute to use. Okay, at the bottom of your agenda for today is a list of 4 future meeting topics. Downtown alleyways, Ms. Carson remains on the March schedule.
Yes.
Okay, so we can look forward to that. Anything else by the commissioners?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Lancaster?
I have, I know you asked to send this separately, but I figure it's probably good to bring it before the whole commission, but I have one small edit for your annual report. So I might be biased to this, but I think it's important to include the presentation that I made to the commission on alternative intersections in December.
Yes, I would agree.
Well, if I can remember any of it, I'll be happy to put that in there for you.
Just the written report is fine with me. It doesn't need to be part of your oral report, just the one sentence in the report, and I'd be happy.
We will get a mention in there. I've contacted you directly to tell you how impressed I was with that both times I've seen you do it. So thank you for that. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn and a second has been received by the chair. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody want to stay here? Great meeting. Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Carson.